Grand Admiral Thrawn is back, guys, and so is Ezra Bridger. I think the episode a lot of us have been waiting for, and not to mention, Filoni's been pulling out all the stops recently. Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen returning, but we can put that aside for 1 minute now, and we can look at what we got this episode. And what we got this episode is something that I have been desiring for a few episodes. Now, all while I agree with everyone that Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati are pretty badass, I've wanted a bit more insight into their characters. Their motivations were a really important thing for me to get a little bit more of. Got a little bit more backstory into Shin Hati, so let's just dive into this, guys. Go ahead and like this video if you do go on to enjoy it. I would deeply appreciate that. Trying to get a little bit more of a Star Wars following here. So let's start right at the beginning. So we have Ahsoka coming out of hyperspace with the Purgils, and they're now in a galaxy quite literally very far away. Ahsoka speaks to Huyang about how she didn't really tell Hera about Sabine going with the enemy willingly. She saw that through the Force, and she's obviously kind of a bit like, yeah, why did this really happen? I kind of get it. She wants to see Ezra, but she put that choice before kind of the fate of the galaxy. But the main meat of what we have to get into next is that they now come out of hyperspace at Peridea. Now, this is what I found so fascinating, and the fact that Dave Filoni is going into this new galaxy here is crazy. Like, as in, when I say crazy, I mean crazy potential for the future. Because yes, Star Wars has to, it doesn't have to, but with whatever projects we get going into the future leading up to the sequels, they kind of need to pave the way for the sequels at some point. But we do have quite a nice gap of time in The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. But in that gap of time, we also have another galaxy now, which has excited me in a way that maybe on paper, if you said to me, would you want to go to another galaxy in Star Wars? And I'd be like, no, why not? But let's just explore what fans want to see in this one instead of the stuff that kind of rubs them the wrong way. Now, all while I want to do that, and I want to go into the Old Republic where you still had the Old Republic like KOTOR in that of the galaxy we know in Star Wars of Coruscant and Korriban and other planets like that, even though they freaking renamed some of them. I'm actually pretty down to see more of this mysterious galaxy because stop number 1 was very intriguing. So again, Peridea, the ancient homeworld of Morgan Elsbeth's ancestors, the Dathmiri. Baylan talks about how the Jedi archive spoke of this place, and it was the end of a migration route as used by the Star Whales as they traversed the void from one galaxy to the other. Morgan Elsbeth in this moment even says that her people were among the first to harness and ride the creatures in the days before time was counted. Baylan ends this by saying that the whales come here to die. Peridea is a graveyard, and literally as we see the Eye of Sion approach the planet, it seems that the whole ring around the planet is made up of Purgil bones. So all of this, it was super interesting to me. A little cool lore dump here, and there's quite a few, dumps of knowledge this episode that, again, somewhat invigorates my desire to now just see a story told in a galaxy far away, this one. And also, why do the Purgil come here to die? This could tie in my opinion, with maybe something bigger that is going on in this galaxy. The very thing that Baylan Skoll is saying that is potentially calling out to him. Gotta love Shin Hati giving Sabine the evil stares here. And this is when we see a huge Night Sister statue, and there's quite a few of them on the planet from what we can gather. Now, this is really reminiscent to me of the Pillars of Kings statues from The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, if you know what I'm on about. I hope that there's some of you. And there's just something really creepy about this planet's location, the energy, the vibe it's giving off, and I know that's kind of the point. I mean, after all, this is kind of the chilling place of, Night Sisters and Morgan Elsbeth's people. We even now see, up next, freaking great mothers. So these might be some of the few left of their kind, including Morgan Elsbeth, and then of course other characters like Merrin from Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor. So now that they've congratulated Morgan Elsbeth for, heeding their visions and Night Sister magic, we get to a scene that I think has been long awaited for me, just to get that little bit more depth there, in where Shin Hati asks what is concerning Baylan as he looks out across Peridia. So here he says, this is a land of dreams and madness. Children's stories come to life. This really plays into the mystery of what we're left off with at the end of the episode. Like, he's heard about this place since he heard folk tales about it since he was a youngling. So he's really been banking on whatever is contained here working out. Now, this is where we get a teeny bit more insight into Shin Hati. We'll revisit Baylan in a second, and she's like, well, I know no such stories, and this is when Baylan says you weren't raised at the temple. As many of us figured out anyway with regards to Shin Hati's backstory, maybe we'll get a little bit more to expand on that from a scene a little bit later, just to kind of link it in here with regards to Shin Hati. We hear Shin ask Baylan if he knows of Ezra Bridger, and he says that no, he's too young, he comes from a breed of Bokken Jedi. And that mainly describes those who were trained in the ways of the Force, and in particular as a Jedi after the temple fell. And that's when Shin's like me? Yeah, kind of, but not really. And this is the coolest insight so far. Baylan then says, no, he was trained as a Jedi. I trained to be something more. So I think this somewhat gives us information we already knew in how, she's not Sith, neither is Baylan, but they're not Jedi. I'm pretty sure, even though we haven't heard him talk about Sith, that he does view not only the Jedi, but Sith too as kind of like a flawed way to navigate. And as we know, the somewhat lightsaber colors reflect this, neither being pure dark nor light, more of this kind of orange. So when you somewhat mix all of this in with Baylan recounting how when he was a bit older than Shin was at this moment, he watched everything he knew burn. And he says he couldn't make sense of it at the time, but as you get older, look at history, you realize it's all inevitable. The fall of the Jedi, the rise of the Empire, it repeats again and again and again. And in this moment, I was like, yes, they're finally kind of getting into what Baylan really wants to bring forward that isn't the Empire, nor a somewhat new Republic with Jedi. Shin asks in this moment, so then isn't it our turn now? Won't our alliance with Thrawn finally bring us into power? And I feel like she has a bit of a naive... I know she was trained to be something more, but her dialogue there kind of comes across as like a Sith apprentice, like, it's now our turn to get power now, yeah. But Baylan is like, that sort of power is fleeting, my Padawan. Like, you got a little bit to learn. We're not after just power, we're after something more here. As he says in this next moment, what I seek is the beginning, so I may finally bring this cycle to an end. That doesn't seem to be Thrawn as well, because this is what I think I appreciate a lot in this episode. He kind of gives away that Thrawn, in this moment to Shin Hati, isn't that power. That power is fleeting. Thrawn, I think in Baylan Skoll's mind, will inevitably be a part of that cycle that falls again and again and again. So Shin says in this moment, and that beginning is here, and he says, if the old stories are true. So in order to bring in this new beginning, Baylan's hope always lied in finding whatever the tales of Peridia tease to people, or younglings, and he's just been like, I'm gonna find this one day. I don't know, maybe he got a bit more concrete info to risk all of this and then come here to maybe find nothing, but he is pretty sure, and he is so convicted in, and this is somewhat of a noble cause in a way, I guess you could say. Baylan isn't pure power hungry Sith. He's not pure light-sided Jedi. As he says towards the end of the episode, if we want to go into that part of it, when he was asked if he missed the order, he misses the idea of it. He wanted to stand for something as valiant as the idea of what the Jedi, want to uphold. But again, it's a part of that cycle that falls, despite being keepers of the peace that they say they are. And this is where Shin is a bit but Master, you see it here in this wasteland? And this is when he says, I see what was once the great witch kingdom of Dathmiri. Shin once again voices her reservations about this and says they seem eager to leave this place. Maybe we should too. It's a good point. Thrawn, if there's such power here, and the Great Mothers want to leave this place, why would we stay here, Master? What's going on? But this is when Baylan says perhaps they flee a power greater than their own. Something calls to me. Can't you hear it? Something stirs here. Can't you see it? What is that thing? But whatever this thing is, somehow this thing that stirs here, that calls to him, will, apparently according to Baylan, and perhaps we'll hear the children's story, the folk tale, if you will, of whatever lies on Peridia, will provide someone the power to command peace throughout the galaxy. Because that's a simple way of putting it, but that is essentially what is being served up to us in the story, and I'm dying to know what that is. But I'm glad now that I know what the motivation is for Baylan beyond the basics of, oh yeah, I want to bring order, but okay, what makes you think you can do that? Okay, now we somewhat know, but we don't know what that thing is, so you've still got me locked in, Ahsoka. I want to know. But anyway, ramble over about the whole Baylan side of things. Would love to know your thoughts about that. This is when we pick up with Sabine in her cell, somewhat maybe starting to regret what she did in helping Baylan. And this is when she tries to use the Force. We get a little bit of vibrations, but of course, this is really Grand Admiral Thrawn's giant Star Destroyer known as a Chimera arriving. And, you know, the amount of times they keep teasing Sabine trying to use the Force, but it turns out to be something else that is really happening. You just know that she's going to do something significant when the time comes. I just hope that whenever that time comes, it's not like a really convenient moment, because out of all the times you fail, I can imagine in a future episode of Ahsoka, she does that one thing right when she has to, if you know what I mean. Kind of reminds me of the ending of Multiverse of Madness. But either way, Thrawn, this is when he enters, and my god. I loved seeing the Chimera. It was a little bit banged up, naturally. Some of its engines aren't firing. You can see that it's quite stripped in certain areas. I love the backing tracks in this moment as the Night Troopers, who look freaking badass, by the way. Now, I didn't want to go, like, so fanboy over the Night Troopers here, because sometimes in Star Wars, they portray new troopers like this to be like, oh man, yeah, look how badass they are. You know, we see the captain of Thrawn's guard here with his old kind of gladiator-like mask over his Night Trooper, Stormtrooper mask, if you will, commanding the Night Troopers to attention while Thrawn walks through the crowd. The Night Trooper armor is held together with fabric straps, so you've got all of these cracks and fractures all the way down to the core of their suits, and it's like, my god, these guys look solid, but will they miss? That's what happens, man. It's like all these things. Mandalorian brings in these badass-looking Death Trooper kind of things, and I'm like, okay, let's see what you got. Oh, you're kind of useless. Yeah, you're really not actually that intimidating, to be honest. So I hope, with the badassery they served up on a platter to me here with the Night Troopers and Thrawn's entrance, and the way he's kind of conditioned them, you know, and I believe it because it's Grand Admiral Thrawn. I really hope that this remains consistently this cool, but X to doubt. I love Thrawn's first line here as well, and where he's like, what was first just a dream has become a frightening reality for those who may oppose us. That's brilliant. What a line. I'm coming home. Oh man, just they wait. You know, it's like he rocks in there with that energy. I thought that Lars Mikkelsen did a great job as Thrawn. I'm pretty sure every Star Wars fan will be happy with this. Of course, he voiced Thrawn in Rebels. Some people were like, but will he really pull off the demeanor in live action? Well, I think he does. He's doing everything that he needs to as Thrawn, and I'll point this out in a couple of ways throughout the rest of this breakdown. So here, he's informed that he has a prisoner, and I like this moment, and I think this could be quite significant, because he says, you never spoke of this to the Great Mothers. You know, Thrawn did not expect this prisoner. That's when the Great Mothers say, we did not see it. It is a loose thread. And in this moment, I was like, very interesting, because the way that this is somewhat being presented, like Thrawn, as much as he seemingly is underpowered, he's kind of overpowered in a way. Because here, he is basically portrayed as being like Odin, in a sense, from Norse mythology, with essentially his Norns, of whom weave the tapestry of fate. The Night Sisters here can kind of look at that, see what's kind of going on. He gets his, like, recon of the future, but it's not always 110% accurate. There's still some surprises, and Sabine did not fit into that thread of fate, that tapestry of fate. I do like how, you know, in a kind of heroic way, there's still some things that even if the enemy has something as overpowered as that they can't account for. And so we have Thrawn meet Shin, Hati, and Baylan's skull. And Baylan says that he parted with the Jedi long ago, and I like this little reference to him saying, you would not be the first. I also love this comment that he made about knowing who Baylan's skull was, just in terms of how in-depth Grand Admiral Thrawn's knowledge is. And this is what I mean. It's lots of little details, of course, with Dave Filoni here, having dealt with Thrawn in Rebels, that really do the character traits of Thrawn justice, from that of even the source material as well. He's very masterful in many ways. His knowledge is extensive, so when he knew who Baylan's skull was, I was like, okay, cool, But it kind of raised a little question for me later on with what he said at the end of the episode with regards to Ahsoka Tano. So I want to pick your brains about that. Stay tuned until that part of this breakdown, because I was a bit like, But yeah, this makes sense. Sure, Thrawn may not know every single Jedi and their Padawan, but he kind of knew of certain people, especially if they were maybe around Baylan Skoll's age and rank in the Clone Wars. So this is when Thrawn learns about Sabine being the prisoner. He even meets Sabine next. What I liked most about these moments is they're just Thrawn's observations, even though they could be taken as burns to Sabine. But in reality, Thrawn isn't so much of a character to dunk on you deliberately like that, you know, when he can, like all the time. He just says something that is so true sometimes that it can just cut, if you know what I mean. So I don't think he's going out of his way to mock her, but it's just him saying the plain truth when he says things like, "Ah yes, the desire to be reunited with your long-lost friend, how that singular focus will reshape our galaxy." And it's true. I mean, according to him, like, if he's successful, returns back to the main galaxy, all of that would be thanks to Sabine. But it's also such a burn at the same time. So in this moment, he essentially allows Sabine to go free. He's going to give her provisions, weapons back, a mount to go find Ezra. The only thing I didn't really know how to read of this moment for the rest of the episode is like, okay, maybe Ezra Bridger departed ways from you a long time ago, and I'm not saying Thrawn is without his saltiness, even though he doesn't usually let it show so transparently, but he's never really been able to take him out. Maybe he's tried. I mean, after all, he did say that he would share their latest updates as to where Bridger's whereabouts are, but as we know from Ezra later on, he moves the camp around, so he's probably run into trouble with Thrawn trying to take him out every now and again. So I think, as he says later on as well, it doesn't really matter if they're killed or if they're stranded here. All that matters is me getting back to the main galaxy. But there clearly is just a little bit of something that Thrawn does want, and that is, if Sabine could die, if Ezra could die, all the better. So he gives her the illusion of finding Ezra, which is true, but he also sends Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll after Sabine to not only destroy Sabine, but also Ezra. And even later on, in a conversation with Morgan Elsbeth, he was like, well, if Baylan and Shin also get stranded and die, it's of no consequence. So Thrawn is just like, I'll try and fulfill a bonus mission while I'm on my way back to the main galaxy, which is the priority. So we see Sabine go off on her mount. I have to admit, this just reminded me of playing SWTOR with a mount, just going off on a planet, on a side quest, just out there into the world. It was very predictable that Sabine was going to get jumped by nomads when she was teased about them by one of the night troopers. She ignites her lightsaber, takes them out, but the thing is, her scanner is fried. But it's a good thing that the mount started to sniff the location of the very people who would be able to point her to where Ezra is. I guess you could say that's convenient, but if there's not really many other people around, maybe it could be like the mount just wanted to go to those little turtle things. I don't know. But either way, that's what happened. She gets led to the turtle hobbits. I think I'm going to call them that, because this is where the mount begins to lick a rock. And it turns out to be Frodo hiding under his cloak. Lord of the Rings fans should know what I mean there. But really, it is another Star Wars cute creation here. It points to Sabine's Rebel Alliance logo on her pauldron. It turns out that the little hobbit turtle thing is wearing a necklace with the Rebel Alliance logo. He summons all of his friends to come over, and Sabine can tell that they know of Ezra, because Ezra is essentially their guardian, I guess. Now, of course, it's important to be aware, even though we've already spoken about the Baylan Skoll stuff, that he is on their trail. So I'm a bit worried about the little hobbit turtle people, because I don't want any of those little cute creatures to become collateral damage when Shin Hati and Baylan go ham. And, you know, I know I'm already jumping to it, but my God, when that happens, to see Ezra, Sabine versus Shin Hati and Baylan, that's a 2v2 that could happen there. Oh my God, that sounds epic to me. By the way, Sabine, I'm already jumping ahead, is led to their camp. The whole village seems very happy and thriving within their own means. And of course, Ezra appears and says, I knew I could count on you. And he's there with his long hair. I was hoping he would have his long hair back, a beard, just smiling at her. I love his attire here. It's like some kind of robes, but with some chainmail looking stuff underneath, of course, with him kind of living in the wild like he does. And I have to admit, while I was struggling at the beginning to really see these characters as the live action counterparts of the animated versions, here with Sabine and Ezra reuniting for the first time in years, I really did actually feel that connection there. They did feel very Ezra and Sabine to me, and that made me very happy. It made me feel very feelsy based on the character history there, that I'm happy that I could translate onto the live action, because, you know, sure, we know in our heads that these are two characters reuniting for the first time in years, but will I really feel it? Because they're two new actors playing those roles. But it worked, and that was the most important thing that I think they had to nail. Now, Aman Esfandi, I don't know if that's how you pronounce the actor's name playing Ezra. I obviously haven't seen enough of him yet, but I definitely, as I kind of just teased, got the vibes there. The chemistry seemed to be there. Ezra, of course, has questions because he's been very out the loop, but Sabine doesn't want to answer them necessarily because she just wants to be happy again. And, you know, you have to admit, if Ezra knew that Sabine did what Ahsoka told her not to, I think Ezra would, unfortunately, as much as Sabine wouldn't really want to hear this, would agree with Ahsoka, because everything that he sacrificed, all the years of him being here stranded, could amount to nothing if Thrawn is able to hop back to the main galaxy because of Sabine's desire. Very human desire, I might add. I'm not saying any of us would really do any different in that position to reconnect with him. So I think that's what makes this story a bit of a multifaceted one, and one that I really am enjoying, specifically in that vein. At the very end of the episode, Thrawn is informed by the Great Mothers that the threads of fate have spoken to us. Another comes, a Jedi. They ride the travelers. So Thrawn is like, oh, well, that is unwelcome news. Could it really be the deceased Ahsoka Tano? You know, and I was just like, oh, okay. You know, so he's getting a bit of a heads up. This is one of the meaty conversations that I wanted to get to, and I don't want to go on about this one for ages, but he says in this moment, we shall consider Ahsoka Tano alive until we know otherwise. We shall prepare accordingly. Fair enough. So this is when he says, I want to know her background, history, homeworld, her master, everything. So let me first say right off the bat, okay, you know, Thrawn is always one to be extremely prepared. He's always like 10 steps ahead. He's already ahead of those steps that you might have taken into account, and he's another 10 steps ahead. So him asking for information like this, wanting to be prepared, makes sense. But what doesn't really add up to me, and I invite you to educate me in the comments if I'm wrong, him saying, I want to know her background, history, homeworld, her master, everything with regards to Ahsoka Tano, I think it's reasonable to say that if somebody is asking those things, that they may not know about that person. If you're asking about their background, history, homeworld, master, that entails to me he doesn't know much, if anything, about Ahsoka Tano. But he should know about Ahsoka. He knows about Anakin Skywalker. I mean, heck, he knows about Baylan's skull from his knowledge about prolific Jedi during the Clone Wars, right? He definitely knows about Anakin Skywalker in the source material. So all I'm saying here is, with what we know about Thrawn knowing of Anakin, and even knowing that Anakin became Vader, he would know, one would assume, that Anakin had a Padawan named Ahsoka. Now, maybe you could say to me, maybe in the canon here, like, he knows who Anakin is, Boba, don't worry about that, but maybe he just didn't really pay much attention to the Padawans. That's why he knows about Anakin. That's why he knows about Baylan. He knew of, like, maybe generals during the Clone Wars and things like that, but maybe not their Padawans. But, like, really? I don't know, man. Like, he would know that. I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to implement this into the show, like, oh, I knew your master, Anakin Skywalker. Something like that. So there's a cool line there between Ahsoka and Thrawn. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something here. Let me know. And then he says at the end, if a star whale approaches Peridia, destroy it with prejudice. Sorry, I can't help trying to do a Thrawn impression. It's god-awful, I know, but it's so interesting talking like this all the time. I like this ending because it is really, again, speaking to the OP, the overpoweredness of the Great Mothers, because he says, I shall once again require the aid of your dark magic. Just speaking to how helpful those Great Mothers will be. So maybe here, I wonder if when we see Ahsoka approach the planet, maybe there's going to be a bit of Night Sister magic deception, and I think shit's going to get crazy there, because he's got people who can basically read fate, use Night Sister magic, which can be really incredible. And that's it, guys. That's my rambly breakdown of this episode of Ahsoka. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think this is the whole Ahsoka has saved Star Wars, but I'll say what I've said before here again, in that Star Wars Ahsoka, or while I think you can nitpick little bits here and there, you know, nothing's ever perfect, no matter what it is with scripts and writing and stuff, this is still giving Star Wars fans, and this is what is brilliant about Dave Filoni heralding in this kind of new content, you know, with his movie as well, with the Mandoverse. Filoni's vision here is bringing Star Wars content to fans that fans have been desiring to see for a long time. And it's honing in on that, it's really curating it, and it's highlighting it. We're diving into a period post-Return of the Jedi where there's actually quite a lot going on with legendary characters in Star Wars such as Grand Admiral Thrawn, major popular characters like Harrison Dula, Ahsoka Tano, Ezra Bridger, all of these characters. Maybe Luke Skywalker could pop up again. So many things that I personally think Andor is the best written Star Wars stuff we've had, and I really do love Andor. Sure, you may find it boring, as a lot of people say, but what I would say about this is the most kind of fan servicey, I would say, appealing to most the general audience, pleasing thing that they could be doing, if you know what I mean. Whereas Andor's more nichey, but better written, in my opinion. But, you know, not really trying to compare them here, but I'm just saying at least there's a little bit for everyone now. And most people, I think, will flock to this kind of material because it's the Star Wars people kind of want to see. But that ends my review, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Like the video if you did. Would really appreciate your own review down in the comments below. Your thoughts and my thoughts. Everything good like that. Again, would really appreciate that like. Really helps boost this video out there. Consider subscribing for more videos like this. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And may the Force be with you always.